Mr. Tom Allard. Will you please come on out?
Chains don't make a slave. Terror, despair, hopelessness make a slave. Chain is just pain. Robert Small was born into bondage in Beaufort, South Carolina, the half-white son of his owner, father, and a chambermaid. He was raised in privileged servitude, which he hated from the beginning, and it got worse every year as he grew. His mom yanked him by the arm and pulled him out in the fields to show him what the slave labor in the fields looked like, to cower him, show him how lucky he was. He wasn't coward and he wasn't lucky, and he hated it more. In an effort to scour the rebelliousness away from his half-white son, his owner father took him on a business trip through the plantations in Mississippi, the dark heart of slavery. And there, surrounded by the abuse and the horror, he offended their hosts by speaking out for better conditions. Hello! It was the last straw. When they got home at 12 years of age, he was hired out to work on the docks and piers of Charleston. For the next several years, he worked as a deckhand and sailmaker and rigger and helmsman. He worked with hard labor and dockside brawls and the flash of knives. 1861, he was hired on as a deckhand on a fast blockade runner, the paddle wheeler, the CSS Planter. He was 15, fearless, and tough as leather. For the next 2 years, he worked and watched and listened and learned. And then one day, between the dangerous voyages, a day that started out like every other day, just the same, he met her. And nothing was ever the same again. Her name was Hannah. She was hired out to work as a maid in a local hotel, and for the first time in their young lives, they found love. And the changes in him were so immediate and so complete that his owner father gave him permission to marry, even allowed him to keep $1 a week of his own salary. They were in love. And his owner father thought, well, this will do him good. He'll grow up, take some responsibility, and that's just exactly what he did. He took some responsibility. May 12th, 1862, the planter was tied up at the pier again, having ferried 4 cannons and 200 rounds of shot from the fort on the Coles Island. Soon the 3 white officers left to spend the night ashore in their finest dressed uniforms, attending a long-planned ball in their honor. Soon after the carriage rolled away, Smalls and 5 of the other deckhands loosed her mooring, slipped into the channel, and cut across the harbor to another pier, where their families anxiously paced. Now, with 19 runaways on board, he was responsible for their lives. Now, it was win or die. They could not be caught. The only value a runaway slave had was to be a public and gruesome example of what happened to runaway slaves. He put on the captain's long coat and the broad-brimmed straw hat, and at 4:30 in the morning he set a course across Charleston Harbor and the 5 forts and checkpoints they had to clear. Having watched and listened and learned, one after the other, he gave the exact right signal back to whatever question was asked. And the final harbor patrol passed him out to the opening of the inner channel just before dawn. Then, 2 things happened for the very first time. The first thing that happened for the very first time was Small spun the wheel as hard as he could to port, heeled her over, and turned her bow out to the open sea. The second thing he did for the very first time was call up full speed ahead. Ching, ching, something the white captain would never do, for fear the boilers would blow. But this was win or die. This was a race against time and distance and boilerplate. Down below, in the engine room, the engineer rode that safety release valve, keeping it right on the edge of exploding, while two dripping wet stokers shoveled a mountain of coal into the roaring furnace, singing at the top of their lungs, "You gotta follow the drink and gourd." Up on deck, all the rest slowly made their way to the very bow of the hard-charging steamer, farthest from the guns of the fort and closest to the Union ships. Then, suddenly, a distant sound snapped around the head of all who heard it. It was a bugle on the ramparts, calling the gunners to man their battery. Now every eye straining through the lightening sky, searching for the telltale smoke. Boom! Ka-wham! A huge geyser of water exploded exactly where they were, but 50 yards off the port beam. Ahead, the open sea. Inside the private hearts of each of the 19 on board was the same fervent prayer. Different words, maybe, the same thought. Go, baby, go, 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 go. Boom! Ka-wham! The huge explosion exactly where they were, but 50 yards astern. Had the second shot been the first shot, they wouldn't need a second shot. But now they were out of range, and there would be no third. Smalls eased back on the throttle and held down on the steam whistle, blowing off pressure and shrieking into the dawn, so long and so loud, everyone in far-off Charleston heard it. Freedom! Liberty or death! It's an American theme. He made his way to the nearest blockade ship, surrendered the ship and cargo, and as each of those 19 souls stepped aboard the Navy ship, they were born again free. Taking care of his people first, the mark of good leadership. Smalls was the last to take that stride. "I brought President Lincoln some cannons," he said. "I'm sure he'll put them to good use." The story caused such a furor in the North. Smalls was invited to the White House to meet President Lincoln and Secretary of War Stanton, where he argued eloquently and ultimately successfully that those leaders should allow black soldiers to help in the fight for freedom. And from that day to this, from the Buffalo soldiers on the frontier to the Marines in Fallujah, black Americans have risked and given their all for the Union. Dressed again in a uniform, this time blue, he was a pilot on a Yankee ship. When he went into the history books being the first black man to ever command a U.S. naval vessel, when an inexperienced young white captain blundered into a Confederate ambush and was considering surrendering, Smalls knew if he surrendered, every black man on the ship would be executed immediately. He spun the wheel and he steered a crazy man course. Full speed ahead, right through the gunfight. Down below, that engineer riding that safety valve. After the war, he took his prize money and he bought his owner-father's big mansion in Beaufort. And in a display of his character, he allowed the delusional widow of his owner-father to move back into her private quarters where she was cared for as a family member the rest of her life. As a businessman, he helped create the Freedman store. He helped create the Enterprise Railroad, an 18-mile horse-drawn freight trolley that hauled cargo from the seaport to the riverfront warehouses. He served 5 years in the state senate, helped create compulsory public education for all races, created the South Carolina Republican Party, served 5 terms in the United States House of Representatives, and was instrumental in the passage of the 14th Amendment, which guarantees citizenship to most who are born in this country. Most Native Americans couldn't be Americans until 1924, the year my father was born. Since he briefly served as the commander of the South Carolina militia with the honorary title of general, he is the first and so far only black American to have his name on a U.S. Army ship the Major General Robert Smalls, VSF-8, Commission 2004. That's worthy of him. A proud ship built to go into harm's way. Like Smalls himself, badass and ready to risk it all for freedom.